Remember last week when I liked everything? Well, that was last week. This week, not so much. There's something, I'll tell you what, there are three plays, or three different theatrical experiences. Actually, there's a total of 5 plays. And there's something to like in each of them, but I wasn't crazy about any of them. But let me explain to you what I'm talking about. All right, we've got, relatively speaking, 3 one-act comedies. This is probably the glitteriest of the 3. It's we've got Talking Cure, George is Dead, and Honeymoon Motel. Excuse me. Talking Cure is written by Ethan Coen. Yeah, that Ethan Coen, and stars 2 people of whom I was not very familiar, Jason Kravitz and Donnie Hawk. The idea is that a therapist is talking with a guy in prison, and the guy is very resistant and hostile. And this goes on for a while. And as a therapist, I'm sort of vaguely interested in it. I'm not sure the audience was, to be quite honest. And then the scene fades to black, and we see the prisoner's parents, who are arguing with each other. We understand the idea, relatively speaking, get it's a pun, like your relatives. So the idea is that that's how he learned to be confrontational, that he'd never answer the question with anything other than a question. There's supposed to be a light bulb that goes on that we go, aha. I probably like it as well as anybody, because that's sort of what I do, and the idea between, the parental influence and how we turn out later in our life, iffy. Okay. Fade to black, a 4-minute intermission, no, a 4-minute break. It wasn't really an intermission. George is Dead. This is written by Elaine May, who we haven't heard from for a while. Elaine May, and of Elaine May and Mike Nichols fame, right? This one stars Marlo Thomas, who looks great, nearly unrecognizable. I mean, she's blonde now, and all of us view Marlo as being a brunette, but she's great in it. And the idea being that she sort of stumbles into this woman's apartment or house, and her husband has just died. It's called George is Dead, and it turns out that the woman who is the mistress of the house was Marlo's nanny's daughter. Got it? So the idea being that in theory, even though Marlo is significantly older than this woman, that these two were kind of rivals for mom's attention, right? Because one was a professional mom, the nanny, and the other was her real mom. I think we're supposed to pick that up. The first half of this is great, and Marlo Thomas is wonderful. It's really her comic timing, and she's adorable, and it just doesn't know where to go. And when the husband comes back, and then the nanny comes back, and the idea being, relatively speaking, that we learn, from our mom. And the idea of this one is kind of a variation on the theme of sibling rivalry. Again, I think I probably picked that up more than most of the audience, because this is what I do for a living. Okay, let's get us to number 3. Real intermission, come back, the sort of centerpiece of the trilogy, written by Woody Allen. And to my knowledge, I don't think Woody Allen's done a whole lot for Broadway. I mean, he writes movies that look like plays, but to my knowledge, there's no a whole lot. This one stars, wait do you hear the cast list? Steve Guttenberg, Ari Grainer, Grant Shoud, Julie Kavner, Mark Lynn Baker, Richard Libertini, and again, Jason Kravitz, Danny Hawk are in it again. It opens up in a tacky motel room, complete with jacuzzi and circular bed and mirrors. And Steve Guttenberg wanders in, giddy, with a bride, Ari Grainer, and then the rest of the wedding party comes in through the play. If I tell you what's going on, you will miss the only real surprise in the whole thing, which is kind of fun. This is certainly the best of the 3. I had the sense that this should have been an off-Broadway kind of thing. And if you'd paid, $70, $75, somewhere between $50 and $75 to see 3 one-acts, and one of them was Woody Allen, and they had some very famous people in it, you might have been pleased. This is sitcom humor, I'm afraid, and it's just not what you want. I think for $150 a ticket, this was, or $130, $125. So I thought that the Woody Allen was certainly the best. It was fun seeing Marlo Thomas. This isn't Broadway as far as I'm concerned, but there are differences of opinion. Okay, The Atmosphere of Memory. This is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. This is from the Labyrinth Theater Group, who had such a success in the MF with the Hat last year, with Chris Rock and and whatever, Bobby Cannavale, which was terrific. And I think they're hoping to repeat it with this, and it's got some problems. It has Ellen Burstyn in it, not bad. It's got Matt Casella, that people know from TV, and it's got most notably the terrific John Glover. The story is that a guy is a playwright, and he's writing a story of his family, and he's having his mother star as his mother. Can you say Freudian? And then John Glover shows up, and John Glover in this is just sex on a stick. I mean, he's just adorable in this. I've watched John Glover, in everything at Broadway, and he always comes in, steals the play out from underneath everybody. The idea, this is in 2 acts, and you really only needed the first act, or the second act. The first act makes no sense. You didn't need it at all. It's too long. I think this play, with some editing, could do very well on Broadway. It's got, again, I'm a psychologist, so the idea of sort of dramatizing our trauma from our childhood and our mothers and fathers' resolution, and what it takes to be a good mother and what it takes to be a good father. And I thought there were some really electric things in this. Didn't need the first act at all. Making this a 90-minute and doing some editing, I think it could really be something. It's called The Atmosphere of Memory. And there's some really terrific things in it. It needs some work. But maybe somebody will put the work in, because I really did think that there were some wonderful things, and it's wonderful to see Ellen Burstyn and John Glover. I'd watch Read the Phone Book. Okay, and this is the third. As I said, there's something to like about all of them, but I don't know that I'd recommend any of the 3. A Charity Case, which is down in Theater Row. Do you know the issue about Theater Row? Do you know when they did some urban renewal down there, that the deal was that you had to have some public space, which is true in the city in general. And so some people put in parks, some people put in fountains. This place put in theaters, which is a very smart thing to do. Theater crowd's much quieter than parks, only used basically at night and matinees on the weekend. And so you've got that whole complex of various size theaters down on the far west of 42nd Street. And if you haven't been down there, you should go, because there's some very reasonably priced theater there, some experimental stuff, a lot of stuff. And what's happening is that they're moving some things that, that's more on 50th Street. 50th Street is the other place, Urban Stages, which you should check out, because what they move is things that have been very big, like Avenue Q, for example, and moving them to a smaller venue to give them more life. And so the ticket prices go down, and it's still great theater. All right, A Charity Case. This is written by an Australian woman, and directed by the same woman. I have problems with people writing and directing. Oh, John Turturro, incidentally, did Relatively Speaking. And clearly not a bad director at all. This has got Alison Fraser in it, which is probably the best known of the cast. The idea is 3 women, one who is adopted, one who gave her daughter up for adoption, and the other is the adopted mother, the mother who adopted the child. So this is something, again, very close to my heart, something I care enormously about. The last scene will break your heart. One of the costumes is great, but this is a work that needed some editing by somebody. Either a director needed to come in and say to the author, we need to cut these scenes, or we need to enlarge this, or this is too over the top, or a writer who, you needed writing and directing, tricky stuff. Most people cannot see the forest for the trees, and this is certainly one of those cases, because it's something you want to like, that I thought didn't work at all. And it's an important theme. And you just wish that that they could have done something a little bit better with it, because it is important. The idea about the fantasy of who our birth mother is, the idea of why women give up children, the idea of the complication of adopting somebody else's child. There's some really important themes here. So is something that you really would like to embrace and can't. All right, so the 3, Relatively Speaking, A Charity Case, and Atmosphere of Memory. In terms of value for price, and I'd probably send you the Atmosphere of Memory. All of them have something to recommend them. None of them are perfect. There's better stuff to spend your money on, unfortunately. If you would like more details and some other things that you might find slightly more worthwhile in terms of time and money, go to drjoyreviews.com or drjoy.com. I am Dr. Joy Brown.